I'd like to call this meeting of Newark City Council Safety Committee to order. 5:30. Members present are Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Guthrie, myself, Mr. Rath.
We have 3 teams.
First item on our agenda this evening is Police Chief Stephen Sarver to discuss the Division of Police 2013 annual report. Thanks for being here, Chief.
Thank you for asking me. I don't think it's so much that I came here to discuss it versus to answer any questions that you might have on it. As I've done every year since I've been the police chief here in the city of Newark, sometime around February, March, I compile the annual report. I send it out to, as we say, everyone in Newark, and I always give council an opportunity to see the report, and then if there's any questions, I'm always more than willing to help them or to answer them. I have nothing specifically that I plan to address.
Yes.
Where in here does the neighborhood impact unit fit in? Is that part of the patrol?
Well, in 2013, if you remember, we didn't have one.
Okay.
So it's not going to be included.
Okay.
It is a part of the patrol.
Okay. I just want to say, as someone who has 2 block watch groups in her ward, I greatly appreciate that unit being there. Jared Conley's come to several meetings, so have a couple other officers, and that's very helpful to the neighbors when they know that there are police officers out there who know their concerns. We
have quite a few block watch groups that are very active, and we try to send a police officer, try to send one to every meeting.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other discussion from the committee?
That's a question, Mr. Chairman. Chief, first I want to thank you for the organizational chart. That is really helpful. One of the things I noticed was there was a big increase in service calls, which is admirable that you're able to do it with your staffing. But when you look at the crime statistics, there's sort of a modest increase, but the number of service calls is significant, close to 4,000. And does that tell us that you're getting a lot of calls that just there are no charges filed, that they're just like barking dog, other type of
as you can see, Mr. Guthrie, and I apologize for cutting off, as you can see, we list every potential type of call that we could answer. Whatever the call is categorized as, computer-wise, we show you exactly how many of those there are. When we do a business check, where you see check area, if one of our officers comes on the radio and says, I'm going to check a business at 123 Main Street, they get a card stamped, because we want to know where that police officer is in case he or she says, I need help. We now know where they're at. That counted for 1,715 of our calls for service. So it's not so much as the public calling us to do something. Every time we have an incident, we stamp a card. Now, the reason I set these out like this is that you can go and look at each individual category and see specifically versus, okay, they got 35,000 calls for service. As an example, juvenile complaints, usually kids playing in the street, somebody's riding a tricycle, they're playing basketball. 1,046 calls were just for that. We become very aggressive in having an officer once during their tour of duty stop by a school in their assigned area and do a school check. The school check's 983. This is just a police officer telling dispatch, I'm at such and such school. They stamp a card so that if anybody says, do you ever check our schools? Yeah, we check them 983 times. So I don't want to mislead you into thinking that we have close to 40,000 times where people call for help. Those are the different types of calls for service we have. Gas leak. You would think that we get quite a few calls for come investigate a gas leak. Of course, the fire department does as well, but we have one. So it really hits and misses as far as what we're actually asked to do.
Well, I guess the one thing that, under the calls for service, and I understand the definition better now, but under the calls for service, there's, on the next page, it shows the statistics, the growth, which is almost 4,000 And then on the next page, the crime statistics breaks out the different crimes for a 4-year period. There must have been a couple categories over here under calls for service that had really significant increases. Do you have any idea what those might have been? For it to jump 4,000?
Right. The only way I'd be able to do that, because there's so many of these, it's easy to give you a 4-year picture of 8 or 9 different crimes. It's easy to give you a 4-year picture of our traffic report. When we're looking at 80-something different categories for calls for service, to try to set those up for a 4-year period, what you can do, and please don't take this as sarcasm, I've given you an annual report for each of the last 5 years. Just compare 1 year to the next year. And if you need prior copies, I have copies of all of them. You did make one comment that crime was slightly up. We have 9 different categories that are indicated here. And only 2 categories was crime up. And breaking and entering, significant increase, about 36%. And just a routine larceny theft, that's where somebody goes out and steals a bike off of somebody's porch, whatever the case, goes to Walmart and steals something. All other 7 categories had decreases in crime. We attribute the breaking and entering and the theft because these deal with property crimes. A piece of the economy, although the economy is getting better. Drug use in society today. The easiest way to get money to go buy some heroin or some meth is to steal something and sell it for $2, and then you go get your fix. The people-on-people crime and the serious crimes, such as breaking into somebody's house, stealing people's cars, all those categories are down. You're going to think that a city the size of Newark, there were 29 either aggravated robberies, means force was used or a weapon, or robberies. 29 an entire year. That's barely, not even quite, 2.5 a month. To say that Newark is a safe community, that's a great indication right there.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I've got a couple more questions. You want to go ahead?
I just want to say I think this is a very comprehensive report and well done.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate it, and I'm not exactly sure why we're spending all this time on it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take credit for why we're spending time on it. I think that it makes sense for, frankly, all of the division heads or being represented by the department head to review their annual reports. It's a very comprehensive annual report. I would hope that I wouldn't be the only member of council that had any questions. But if I am, I'm more than glad to ask them.
I'll answer any questions you've got specific to the annual report.
Well, one question I don't know that it directly relates to the report, but can you talk to us about, I know that I've talked to both Director Rhodes and Director Spurgeon about the communication system. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and what you see as the priorities for a fix with the communication system?
We're still in conversation with the county. The county, as you probably well aware, are going to a combined 911 plus police and fire. It hasn't been launched yet. They've been waiting to do it. We have asked them for over 2 years in terms of if we wanted to become a part of it, what it would cost. We have 8 dispatchers that we value very much. They're excellent people. They do a great job. They're a part of our family, and we wouldn't want to lose them. But as a responsible police chief and responsible safety director and the mayor, we all have to look at efficiency and cost effectiveness. The county will not talk to us yet as to whether or not this is going to be beneficial to us to make that move, or if it will be cost effective to stay and do what we're doing. If we're going to continue dispatching our own services, there's got to be upgrades made to our communication system. That communication system was put in there in 2005, way before I came on board, and they didn't put the best system in there. The MARC system throughout the state of Ohio is the go-to choice, and to do that, we have to buy 70-something radios. I did get some good word today that the city of Houston, who had they were in a stage 2 process, and they ended up selling all their radios back to MARC. Those radios, which are about $8,000, can be bought now for $795, and they're refurbished. But even then, if we bought 70 radios at $800, that's quite a few bucks. The big sticker to this is that the Marks people charge $30 licensing fee per month for every radio you have. That's where the true expense comes into play. So Bob Carson informed me today that he is in negotiations with Marks to see if they will give us a 2-year hiatus, if you will, not charges, a 2-year gap and not charge us the 30%, to see if we're in a better position in 2 years to afford that. 70 radios at $30 a month, you can quickly see what the cost will be. Just for one radio, that's $360 a year for one radio. So we're in a process, we're looking at different options. We're getting by with what we've got now, but we recognize that in the future we're going to have some serious issues that we need to address.
So it is meeting the current standard that you want it to meet, and as far as efficiency.
I can call on my radio now and somebody will answer.
Do you have, would you want to share with council what, do you have any capital priorities that are regarding such as replacement of police cruisers or anything that you want to share with us as far as what kind of a plan you'd like to be on in the future?
I think that's, with all due respect, Mr. Guthrie, I think that's a discussion you have to have with the Director of Public Service. They have the handle on what the capital improvements are. We recognize that the police division is not the only piece of this city that needs equipment. We, like other people, we're constantly looking for more equipment. I realize that those dollars only go so far. That's really in somebody else's hands other than mine.
Chief, do you have any idea what where you are as far as planned retirements for this year?
For this year, maybe 2 on the horizon. We know of one definitely. He's indicated that he has got a contract on his house, and when the house is sold, he will be leaving. And then we have one other just auction items.
Yes. Chief, thanks for coming tonight. Appreciate being here and taking the time. I know you network with other police chiefs throughout the state and most likely the U.S. I guess, how familiar are you with Canton?
With Canton?
Yes.
I'm familiar with the city. I don't know any issues with their police department.
Okay. The only reason I ask is I know I read it the other day that Canton was the second most dangerous city in the U.S.
Well,
and I was wondering, obviously, it had a list of the top 10. Canton was number 2, and I think it was the only Ohio city on the list.
is that a recent article?
Yeah, it was a week or 2 ago. It was a headline on Yahoo. As you know, as the headlines come across, you look at them and they see dangerous cities.
And I'm sure that's based on per capita.
Right. And the first thing I wanted to do is look and make sure that Newark wasn't there. Congratulations on that. But I guess the question I have for you is, other than size, and I know Canton is probably about 23,000 larger than Newark. Why Canton so dangerous? Why us so much better? Can you make any comment towards that?
No. I've been through Canton. Mm-hmm. I don't know what type of city it is in terms of economical woes or why it's that way. I would have a clue. I'd be more than happy to research it for you.
Yeah, it's not necessary. I just was curious. I thought maybe you might have, if it's the second most dangerous city in the U.S., I thought maybe you would hear about things that happen there and why.
I'm on the internet 6 or 7 different times a day with different stuff through Ohio and through the Ohio Chiefs Association. I wasn't aware it was that second in the nation. I mean, we're not having any police officers killed there, which is usually a good thing as far as true violent crime.
It's always a good thing.
That's a very good thing. Yes.
No, I was just curious. I thought maybe you might have something to say about that.
Yeah, speaking for Newark, I continue to say that this is a very safe city. I wouldn't be afraid to walk on the streets at night, to be in the downtown area. The men and women of our police division get out there and do an earnest job while they're here. Knock on wood, it's been, I don't even know how many years now, close to 20-something years since the Newark police officer fired his gun in the line of duty. That is a tremendous compliment to those men and women.
Chief, I just have one question for you. On page 13, it mentions extra coverage during peak hours. How many additional on patrol would that typically be?
Our first shift and second shift, we call them teams 1 and 2 and teams 3 and 4. There's 7 officers on each of those shifts. When you hit third shift, which is at 10 o'clock at night, there's only 5 officers assigned to each shift. But because of a 5-hour overlap, then you get extra police officers on the street between 10 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning.
Thank you. Do we have any other discussion?
Sorry, Chief, follow my own rules. Mr. Chairman, Chief, I want to thank you again for coming tonight, because as a new member of council, it is helpful to have some public discussion about these things, and you put so much time into these reports, and we'll have some discussion about it, so I want to thank you personally for presenting tonight. I had 3 areas that I related to the report that I was hoping you could address for us. One was the strategic plan that is mentioned in the report. Could you speak a little bit about that process and about who's involved on that committee, and specifically the residents that might serve on that committee? Is there some diversity that serves on your strategic plan committee? Secondly, I was curious, as a part of your strategic plan, you talk about strengthening relationships. So I was curious about, under the Detective Bureau and the War on Drugs, what could you speak to any type of relationships with other social service agencies or with the courts, or maybe just speak some comments relating to strengthening relationships as it relates to crystal meth and the heroin, the war on drugs. And then lastly, I was curious about the training. Are officers required to go through some type of regular training for to handling mental illness and other diversities, race, color, gender, that type of thing? So I guess the strategic plan, war on drugs, strengthening relationships, and then training for officers in dealing with diversities. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a mouthful. We did the strategic plan. We initially did it way back in 2009. So it's been 5 years since we've done it. We mixed different people from government. We brought in different segments of the population to show diversity. We brought in school people. We brought in people from the prosecutor's office. We had other government officials. We had citizens. We had schools. We had a very good makeup. The strategic plan is on our website. It's always current. And the initial part of the strategic plan, it will list you every member, it will show you every person that was a part of that committee. What we did was we brought everybody together. We didn't want this just to be our goal. We wanted to know what the community wanted, what other government entities wanted. We brought in people from the prosecutor's office, as I said. We wanted to find out regionally what should our goal be. So we created goals, and the whole idea is to work in partnership. Part of our mission statement is to work in partnership with the citizens of the community. So there's several different social service agencies that we work with, Licking County Jobs and Family Services and so forth, where we, I don't want to say attack the community collaboratively, but to be able to work together. The war on drugs, we obviously work with the Central Ohio Drug Task Force, the prosecutor's office on that. The neighborhood impact unit is a big piece of this. What I would encourage you to do, so I can better answer your question, is just to look at the strategic plan. In that, we identified what the goals were, and then we wanted to find out what the strategies are. How do you reach those goals? In order to have strategies, you have to have measurements. How many, if we really want to reduce crime, how much do we want to reduce it on an annual basis? You have to have ownership. It has to be assigned to somebody who's responsible for seeing this done. Every year, and the most current one is on the website as well, every year we then go in to see what goals we accomplish. Some are just put off because they weren't reachable that year, and then it becomes part of our goal. Our 3-year strategic plan is a perpetual plan, so it's not as if you do a 2012 and 2015 and you wait for 2015 to end and start a new one. In 2012, as an example, it was 2012, 13, and 14. Beginning in 2013, we went back and saw what did we fix in 2012, where did we fall short, and it became in 2013, 2014, 2015 plan. Our current plan is 2014 to 2016. So every year we go in and see how we're doing. But we definitely work in partnerships with several different parts of the community to achieve these goals. The last piece you had?
training.
Training. There are several things that were mandated to do by the state of Ohio. Every year, I shouldn't say every year, this year and most years, the state of Ohio will credit every Ohio police officer $25 for 1 hour of training. But every person in the police department has to attend that training. And with the Attorney General's office is really beefed up what we call e-OPATA, where you can go in and do an online training course. So for 2014, each police officer in the state of Ohio is required a minimum of 4 hours of training. And you think that's not much, is it? But that's to get to $25. So we have 70 police officers, including myself. Every one of us will do those 4 hours. Every one of us will get $100. Now, when I say us, it's not me individually. But in 2015, they'll write a check to us for $7,000 for attending just 4 hours of training. We can then use that $7,000 for any type of training that we want. We're set up what we call Overlap Wednesday. Our officers either work Sunday through Wednesday or Wednesday through Saturday, with the exception of the administrative staff that work Monday through Friday. So on Wednesday, everybody in the police division works. This is a way that we use, when we call an Overlap Wednesday, we use training. It could be firearms training, it could be self-defense, it could be driving instructors training, it could be where we bring the prosecutor's office in and they want to talk to us about courtroom testimony. Our officers get hundreds of hours of training each year. Some of them, sometimes there's a push for cultural diversity. Sometimes the big one right now is autism, how to deal with kids, with people with autism. We had a recent incident I can't go into detail with because it's still being investigated, but we had a child at the Citadel that was an autistic child, and when the teachers went to control the child reacted. The police officers arrived on the scene. This child was actively attacking members of the staff, and our police officers had to do something. We couldn't just sit back and allow this to happen. Of course, the mother has made public claims that we don't know how to deal with kids that are autistic. We have had training. Something had to be done to stop that child without hurting the child. But as a follow-up, all of our officers are now going to, including myself, I just did it last week, a 1 hour presentation, and which is, you have to take a test at the end on how to deal with kids with that are autistic and with developmental disabilities in general. So we are a very well-trained police officer, and 90% of it, I give credit to our own personnel for doing the training. They'll go away and do self-defense or whatever, and then come back and train everybody else. I hope I answered your question.
Do we have any discussion from other council members? Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I've got another question, but it's regarding cruisers, and I'd like to direct that at the directors. That's all right.
Yes.
Thanks, Chief.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you very much.
Would Director Rose or Director Spurgeon like to address my question regarding the cruiser plan for cruiser replacement?
All right. If there's no further discussion, that concludes our agenda for this evening. Finance is next.
Okay, we'll call the Finance Committee meeting to order. And members present are Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Marmee, Mr. Love, Mr. Koss, and myself. We have a few items on our agenda this evening, and the first is to consider resolution number 1423, appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation. There are 4 sections to this piece of legislation, which is non-expedited. Someone here to speak on the first section, which is related to the summer youth program. Any skills?
The city has decided to participate for year number 2 with King County for the summer youth program. And this year, the way the program works, we front the cost for the participants. There will be 7 participants. 6 will be with Jeff Hotchkiss at Cemetery and Parks. 1 will be in community development. This appropriation strictly deals with cemetery and parks. It's not community development at all. And they will be assigned different duties throughout the city to help clean up the city, the cemetery, and so forth. And we will submit invoices, and we will be reimbursed 100% for the costs that we put into the labor costs. There's also an item that's $6,570. This year, the grant program is allowing participants to request equipment. Now, we will not know until probably May at the latest whether everything we requested has been granted, but we want to have the appropriation lined up, knowing that everything's coming through. Otherwise, it'll go back to the general fund. We'll only use what we need. But we'd like to purchase weed eaters, a push mower, chainsaw, hedge trimmer, backpack blower, and we'd also like to rent a mow trim for a few days and a stump grinder. So we can deal with some problems that came throughout the year, but we've got some manpower now, and hopefully we'll be able to get some of this equipment. So that's what this request is about.
Just to clarify, this program is, it's TANF dollars from the counties what will be reimbursed with. Is that correct?
Right, and they get that through the state of Ohio, from the state of Ohio to the county.
And these kids are 18 to mid-20s, is that correct?
No, this year they're a little younger. They're 15 through 24. We're requesting that the kids that work out at the parks, well, aren't kids, they're actually 18 to 24, because they're going to be working with chainsaws and different types of equipment, so we didn't want any minors. Now, the city has no liability because we have a third-party administrator for the temporary help.
Make a motion.
Thank you. Motion, Ms. Floyd. We got a hand for a motion, Mr.
I just had a quick
question.
I'll second it, yeah.
The second by Mr. Bowden. Go ahead with your question.
I just wanted to say, I think it's exceptional productivity for the price, so very supportive of this.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. 5-0. Moved on to council. Thank you very much. And section 2, related to the Hollinger Pool water pipe break.
Mr. Sheriff, during the cold winter, we had a pipe break out at Hollinger Pool. It's been repaired. This is the proceeds from the insurance. We'd just like to reappropriate it.
Motion. A motion by Mr. Buzz. Second, Mr. Carr. Any questions of the committee? Questions of the audience? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion moved on to council. Thank you very much. In section 3, appropriation for the courthouse square beautification.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a check for $1,000. Came from the Newark Development Partners. It's for the courthouse square beautification and getting the flowers around the square.
Pretty for the springtime.
Getting ready for the springtime.
Make a motion.
So motion, Mrs. Floyd. Second, Mr. Bove. Any questions of the committee? Questions from the audience? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried, and get those flowers in. Thank you. Section 4 is related to appropriations for Buckeye Lake Share of AG Dillon Grant.
Yes,
Ms. Field.
this is phase 2, non-match dollars allocated by the Attorney General, and this is for Buckeye Lake Share. Phase 2 is going to have 2 participants, City of Newark and Buckeye Lake. This is what Buckeye Lake is.
Motion.
Motion, Mr. Bove. Second, Mrs. Floyd. Questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion moved on to full council. Thank you very much. That concludes our first resolution. Our second resolution is to consider resolution number 14-24, appropriating monies for the current expenses of municipal corporation. This first section, there are 3 sections in this piece of legislation. First one deals with $74,195 to replace an 11-year-old backhoe. Mr. Loomis.
This is just really general plan to replace equipment, mechanical equipment like this every 7 to 10 years. We've been able to keep this back for 11 years, and so we just need to replace it. This is coming off the state purchase plan. This is the state purchase plan. The price that we need to replace this backhoe.
Make a motion.
Motion, Mr. Bub, second, Mr. Marmee. Questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pose same sign. Motion moves on to full council. Thank you very much. Our second section of this piece of legislation is the vacation pay for employee. This phone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a probation officer who resigned from the probation department and like to pay out his vacation.
Motion.
Motion, Mr. Bub.
Second.
Second, Mrs. Floyd. Questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion moves on to full council. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In section 3 of resolution 1424, Mr. Moorhead.
Thank you. This is an item where we have been working with ODOT and engineering firm by the name of Gannett Fleming from Columbus. And this is to begin the preliminary study and design work on the replacement of the Cherry Valley Road Bridge. And we have chose Gannett Fleming last year, I believe in July, been working through the ODOT process and getting a contract available to them through ODOT, and we're finally at that point, and we would like to sign that contract and move forward. The way the contract works is that the city will pay Gannett Fleming directly and then be reimbursed those engineering costs back from ODOT. So $234,671 is the agreed-to contract amount, and we would like to get them under contract as soon as possible and get this project started.
Motion, Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Second, Mr. Bub. Questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? Mr. Rack.
Thanks. I was wondering if you had an idea when construction might start on that, how long it will last, and if that's taken into consideration through Cherry Valley Energy.
Well, next time, just remember the podium.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. My bad.
No estimate on construction cost or timing yet. At the end of their study, we'll have a better idea of that, though, and I'll come back and present that to everyone at that point.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion goes on to full council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Our third piece of legislation tonight is to consider resolution number 14-26, authorizing the mayor of the city of Newark to enter into a community development block grant funded subrecipient agreement with the hereinafter named organizations to carry out activities included within Newark's fiscal year 2014 community development block grant 1-year action plan. Ms. Gilks, thank you.
The city was notified on March 19th of our 2014 CDBG allocation. This year's allocation is $728,648. It is a cut of $2,622 less than what we received in 2013. When we put these plans together, we are doing them so early. We have to build in, anticipated cuts. Fortunately, our cut wasn't as severe as what we thought. The legislation before you applies to 6 subrecipients that back in October were selected to receive funding, and the first one is Newark Development Partners, CIC, $60,000, Denison University Garden of Hope Project, $1,000, St. Vincent de Paul, St. Vincent Haven, $5,000, Behavioral Health Care Partners Incorporated, $5,000, Salvation Army, $5,000, Licking County Coalition of Care, $4,000. When the CDBG program was being reviewed, the city determined we would provide $80,000 out in the community to sub-recipients. 60,000 of that is for economic development activities, that's the CMC. 20,000 will be split amongst other nonprofit groups that are addressing high and medium priority needs in the city of Newark. And so the outside the CIC, the 5 I listed are the recipients of that $20,000.
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Floyd.
could you read that total amount again? I wrote it down, I think I got
I
it
mean,
right.
for this allocation,
Yes.
it's $728,648.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Bug,
Second.
second Mrs. Floyd. I was just curious, Mrs. Stokes, can you explain, you said these agencies were selecting officers. Can you explain that process a little bit for me?
In July, we sent a notice out to a lot of the nonprofits, letting them know we're going to be starting our one-year plan review. We have an application that is on the website, we email it, they come in. Most of them are quite familiar with the process because they tend to apply each year. What we did in 2013 was put a ceiling, because putting a grant together is a lot of work, and there's no point putting a $40,000 application when you're only going for 5. So, we thought it was more fair to say this is what we've got to offer, and then they filled out the applications. They have a month between July and August. Then we review the different applications, see what the city's needs are. Because of the funding cuts from the state of Ohio and other sources over the years, we've had to pull back the money that in the past went out to the community, because we are going to be meeting those high and medium priority needs as a city. We put money towards cemetery and parks, we put money towards ADA curb ramps, we help Ryan with paving. So more of that's going to be done in-house, simply because we don't have other resources to meet them. So that's basically the process. We send the applications out, we help them if they've got questions, we work with them, and then we meet as a city, different city officials, and everybody's welcome to put their 2 cents in on this, and then we come up with a plan each year.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Put the same sign. Move on to full council. Thank you very much. Our last piece of legislation for Finance Committee tonight is to consider ordinance 14-08 to provide for the issuance of $370,000 of bond anticipation notes in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of improvements to the city's landfill and all necessary appurtenances thereto to declare an emergency. I guess I'll let Mr. Johnson speak, but I don't know why. Can you explain the emergency there? But I'll let you explain that in your comments.
The emergency is just language that Farm Council attached to this. However, I would like for it to be expedited, because I think the due date on the $250,000 portion of this is in early May. And in order for everything to come together, we have to have legislation in place when no one will do anything on this. In order to meet the renewal deadline for a portion of this, I'd like for it to be expedited. Bond council just puts that emergency on. I don't know why.
It just confuses people sometimes.
I'll ask them to stop doing it. About this time last year, the city sold the bond anticipation note, or a one-year short-term instrument, to do reclamation at the landfill. This has been an ongoing project for a little while now. And that $250,000 note is due at this time. It's the city's desired intent to renew that $250,000 for one more year, paying the interest only. Furthermore, additional work needs to be done at the landfill, estimated at $120,000, so that would be added on to the original note, taking it to $370,000. Issue a new note, it'll pay off the $250,000 portion, and we'll have a new piece of debt at $370,000.
Any questions of the committee? Entertain a motion. Motion on Mrs. Floyd. Second, Mr. Bud. Any questions of the audience?
I guess
Oh,
this is
Mr. Marvin.
just- Yeah, I guess this is just a leak that just says never stopping for us, right?
Well, I think the landfill actually closed in 1975.
Right, exactly.
Probably many people in this room weren't born then. Actually, I think I was working here then. It just keeps on going.
Keeps on leaking.
Yeah.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion moved on to full council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that concludes the business of the Finance Committee tonight. And the next is service. Thank you.
Let's start with the Service Committee meeting, please. Members present are Mr. Blake, Mr. Rath, Mr. Roletta, Mr. Bob, myself, and our first is ordinance 1406, changing the zoning classification of certain real property generally described as 363 North 21st Street, City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, from that of single-family residence RL low density district to LO limited office district.
Yes, we've had an application for a zoning change submitted to the office. So the first order of business is to get it before you, and the legislation would be read at a council meeting and then forwarded on the planning commission for public hearings afterwards. So this is the first order of business to get it to service committee, and hopefully that you would forward that on to council for a first reading.
Motion by Mr. Bell. Second. Second by Mr. Rand. Any questions or comments from the committee? Mr. Moorhead?
Mr. Chair? Do you have any indication of what type of office they're planning on putting there?
No, the property owner is just asking to change it from single-family residence to limited office right now. So no specific client or business is proposed there right now. The property owner may have something else, that he may come up with or divulge during the public hearings, but we don't know that at this point.
Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. Thank you very much. You on the full council. Ordinance 1407, an ordinance authorizing and directing the City of Newark City Safety Director to certify to the Licking County Auditor. Sorry. Technical time.
Sorry.
Ordinance 1407, an ordinance authorizing and directing the Newark City Safety Director to certify to the Licking County Auditor the sum of $48,768.56 incurred by the Newark City Property Maintenance Department with respect to property maintenance violations to be placed as a lien upon certain parcels of real property situated in the city of Newark, Ohio. Mr. Spurgeon.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Asking for the committee's support. I'd like to recover the costs on behalf of the citizens with issues of non-compliance with the property maintenance ordinance. You will see attached to this piece the actual properties, the parcel number, the assessment, as well as a 3%, which by law is required, which covers the county's administrative expense in doing this.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman. Director Spurgeon, I'd like to say thanks, keep up the good work, and with that, I'll make a motion.
Second. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spurgeon.
Thank you very much.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. The folks upstairs are working very, very hard.
Thank you, we appreciate it. Resolution 14-27. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of me there. Yeah, we're on. Sorry. let's have a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, committee. I'm back on track now. Pardon me, I just had a moment there, I was out. Okay, here we go. Resolution 1427, Bridge Inspection Program, services including but not limited to bridge load rating calculations, scour assessments, bridge inspections, and fracture critical plan development.
Thank you. This is a new program that ODOT is instituting, and to try to get communities to better meet the federal highway regulations for bridge inspection. ODOT is providing some funding to be able to contract out some of this work on behalf of the cities and doing some of these things that are over and above what just your regular annual bridge inspections, the load rating calculations, the scour assessments, and the fracture critical plan development. So we would like to be able to take advantage of that. It hasn't been determined yet how much we would receive or how little we would receive, but anything would help us. So we want to be in on that. So this is a piece of legislation to let us opt in for that type of help.
It is pointed for an emergency. Is there a deadline for this?
This one.
What does it say it's an emergency? My committee sheet, it says it's an emergency. And it says it's stated on the second page.
It does state that. Again, this is a piece of legislation that came from ODOT.
Okay.
I think they want to get that moving as quick as possible. I don't know what the time limit is. Sorry about that.
But
if we could expedite it at the next meeting, that would be helpful.
Motion by Mr. Buck. Second. Second by Mr. Rath.
Mr. Chair.
What?
Mr. Moore there isn't too many opportunities that we get to talk about bridges, so I'll take this chance if I can. In the, I guess it's considered a metric. There's like 20-some different metrics that they look at. Under prepare and maintain, does it also, if they want to prepare and maintain a bridge, is there also opportunity to upgrade the bridge, or is that just clearly not an option? I mean, will they just fix what it currently is, or will they add any type of enhancements to the bridge? Like if you got an older bridge, I mean, they're just going to fix it to be structurally sound, or?
Well, typically no decorative enhancements and that sort of thing, but basically put it back to a structurally sound condition. I guess is what they would be aiming towards. But yeah, this wouldn't include any. This is actually just for engineering work. This is not for actual construction work.
Well, Mr. Chairman, my next question was going to, I'm sure you've heard of bridge caps. They have one over 670 over in Columbus, and I think they're proposing another one over the I-70, 71 interchange over in Columbus. And those caps would be, add some, you can have a green space cap along the sides of the bridges or some other areas. And so I know particularly like the Ohio Street Bridge in the Little Texas is a bridge where, there's been talk of having a bike path coming along there, and so a nice cap or green cap on that bridge would suffice to a bike path. So perhaps this isn't the discussion to have that type of discussion, time to have that discussion, but I guess I just throw that out as some ideas of keeping those types of bridge caps in, because I know the Ohio Street Bridge would benefit from that.
Yeah.
And even National Drive, if that bridge ever needs to be taken care of to help link neighborhoods instead of dividing neighborhoods with those.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. Thank you, Mr. Moorhead.
I'll stay for the next one.
Okay. Open chair.
This is item number 4 is the consent legislation. Again, this is legislation from ODOT, the city's cooperation and consent. ODOT has been in the process of acquiring properties for the planned Cherry Valley Road interchange project, and this piece of legislation would give the city's concurrence with demolishing the structures that are on those parcels that ODOT has or is in the process of acquiring. The one most pertinent to the city is a small house that's on the south side of Cherry Valley Road, west of Reddington Road, east of Cherry Valley Lodge. It's just sort of right across from the entrance that goes back to the church there on the north side of Cherry Valley Road.
So then, my understanding is that this is through ODOT.
This is through ODOT.
Through us directly, we are, as you said, a partner.
We are a partner in the project, but we are not being asked for any funding at this point. This is all at ODOT's expense.
Motion.
Second.
Any questions from the committee? Any comments? Any questions or comments from the audience? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. This will go on the full council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. That concludes Service Committee.
Economic Development.
Economic Development is next.
Okay, we'll call the Economic Development Committee meeting to order. Those present are myself, Rath, Cost, Blake, Hall, and Johnson. We're here to discuss resolution number 14-25, a resolution to allow for the transfer of ownership of certain real property to the Board of County Commissioners of Lincoln County, Ohio. Mr. Mauder, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As stated, this resolution will allow the city of Newark to transfer this property to Lincoln County. The property was purchased with the intent of being used as a transit facility for indoor storage and maintenance of the city's buses. It was acquired using Federal Transit Administration grant dollars. There were no city tax dollars used for this purpose. Since the city merged its transit system with the county, it no longer has a need for this property and now cannot use it for the intended purpose for which it was acquired. This situation then necessitated the disposal of the property and a repayment of the FTA grant funds to be initiated. Through good communication and coordination, initiated by Newark's Department of Development and supported by Mayor Hall, along with cooperation with the FTA, Mr. Tim Bubb, and the other county commissioners, this alternative is the transfer of public assets through the federal registry system. This process will allow a direct transfer of assets between public entities to take place with no exchange of funds. I repeat, there's no exchange of funds involved in this process. Title of the property will be transferred from the city directly to the county. Now, the positive outcomes of this transfer will be, number one, upon completion of the transfer, no other FTA involvement is required. Number two, no repayment of FTA funds are required. Number three, there are no further obligations to the FTA by either the city or the county, provided that the property remains in public service for at least 5 years from the date of transfer. Number four, this vacant property will now be put into useful service. And number five, all the residents of both Newark and Lincoln County are going to benefit from the acquisition of this asset. So this resolution is the culmination of this transfer process. Now I'd be glad to answer your questions.
Very well prepared today, sir. Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Johnson.
Second.
Seconded by Cost. Any questions from committee members? Any questions from council in the audience? Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I just want to compliment certainly the Department of Development and all the players involved, the county, the FTA. This has been a long process, and it comes to one little sheet of paper here tonight kind of quick, but it's a great remedy. When you use FTA dollars to purchase an asset, they still retain an interest in it, and they can dictate what you do with it. We could not have done alternatives with this property. It had to be used for transfer 20 years. So certainly going into the merger of the two systems, the thing was to get the buses transferred first, and that was a good remedy, and then we kind of put this to tail end because it wasn't important. It wasn't going to be used for the bus system of the county. But we scratched our heads at times, and Mark thinking, what are we going to do about these buildings? Because they're a liability to us. They sit out there, and being vacant there, sometimes there's a little bit of damage to them. There's things like that. So I want to compliment the commissioners. We met with them, it's been over a year ago out there, I think. And certainly met out on site with the media and the public thing, and they thought they could repurpose the buildings and use them. They're excited to have them. So this is a great win-win. It wasn't just call the FDA and they said, this is what you got to do. They learned a lot. I'm going to tell you, there's been a lot of calls, a lot of correspondence, and many hours put into this project. And this is a good win that it comes off our books, so we don't have the liability of it. It goes on as a positive asset for the county to use it and repurpose those buildings. So a great win-win on. I just compliment everybody and the staff that was involved in this. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Monitor. Nice job. Any other questions from anybody in the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Seeing no other issues for the Economic Development Committee, we are adjourned. Up next will be Ways and Means. Your phone. Thank you, Secretary.
All right. Yeah, well, I'm here before you tonight to present some of the info that we gathered a couple of years ago, actually, with a pavement management system analysis, and show you the results of that. And it's still applicable today. And then I also wanted to present to you kind of where we are, where we've been in the last 20 years, funding-wise and mileage-wise, and just show you how that matches up with what the pavement analysis told us. So the goal of the pavement management system is to give a reasonably accurate model of the roadway system, then identify the strategies to maintain the system to the level that we decide upon. So let's see here. So the first part of this was to collect the data on the existing streets. And the things that you would look at are the pavement distresses, which is the surface condition, the pavement roughness or the smoothness on all the streets. And then those two items are generally going into a calculation of what the overall pavement quality would be. I didn't show up quite like it was supposed to, but that's just a picture of several distresses on the streets. Surface distress index is what we would come up with based on the amount of distresses on the streets, taking into account these things: patching, rippling, alligator cracking, potholes, cracking, longitudinal cracks, a whole variety of different things here. And what they used a van. They drove around all the streets in the city. And this van has several cameras and measuring devices on it. And basically they drove every mile of street in the city, picking up, looking for all these types of distresses, and cataloging those in a large database, basically from block to block throughout the city. That's just one of the scan pictures showing a piece of pavement with several cracks in it, some small potholes. You see the pavement striping on there, and then some good pavement too. Basically, from that scan, they were able to come up with the percentage of distresses that were from block to block, and categorize those for each segment of street that they went through. So the idea is to get like I said at the very beginning, an indication of the overall pavement quality throughout the city. Again, that's defined typically by the distresses and the roughness. So we want to get an idea of the overall condition, and then we can determine what we need to do to either keep up that condition or improve that condition. And when we do that, then we can optimize our life cycle costs. So the idea here, this is a graph that's been used for years and years. The pavement that you put down starts at excellent, of course, and after about 40% of its life, it starts deteriorating. When you get a little bit further out, 15% more of its life, it starts dropping quickly. So the idea is to try to not let the pavements get in condition where they're dropping on that drastic fall there. You're trying to do this sort of thing here, where when the pavement starts dropping down, that you start doing rehab strategies to try to bring that back up, to bring this back up, gain you a few more years, push that lifetime out there. Again, you'll do some more maintenance strategies, gain a few more years before you get down into this white section here. So this gray section is where you're doing crack seals, slurry seals, microsurfacing, that sort of thing, sort of the more low-cost pavement rehab strategies. Down here is where you start looking at overlays, 1.5-inch asphalt overlays. And then, of course, when you get down at the bottom here, you're looking at total reconstruction. So we're trying to avoid that. So all of this, the scanning that we did and the calculations and so forth go into what's known as a pavement condition index, the PCI. And the PCI is basically your pavement rating. Basically 85 to 100 is excellent, 85 down to 70 is very good, 70 to 60 is good, 60 to 40 starts falling into fair to marginal, and below 40 is poor. And along with each of those kind of conditions are the sort of treatments that you have to do when you fall that far down. Again, this is kind of a graphical representation of that chart, and basically shows that, here we are, a very good, excellent street. Again, once you get in that middle range, it starts dropping quicker, and it doesn't take long, too many years after that, where it starts getting to a more critical position. So when we look at Newark specifically, this is a pretty good chart because it kind of surprised me. 77.51% of the city streets are ACP, asphalt concrete pavement. Another 0.67% of the streets are actually concrete. So basically 78% of the streets in the city of Newark are residential and they're asphalt, or residential in nature, and like I said, 77.1% of them are asphalt. We look at 1.68% of our streets are arterials. That's basically State Route 16 and State Route 13. Then if you look at the collectors, that's 19.85%. Those are your West Main streets, your North 21st streets, your Mount Vernon roads. So that percentage was smaller than I expected it to be. But about 20% of the streets are collectors. And then, again, a very small amount of our collectors are actually concrete, 0.21%. So that gives you kind of an indication of where most of our street system is. These are some graphs that were developed as part of the study that rank our pavement condition index on the bottom here to the percentage of our network. And we see that a large percentage of our streets, the highest percentage of our streets are in the 40 to 50 range. Basically, when you average everything out, Newark sits at about a 60 on the PCI index right now. And that is pretty much average of what they've seen in other communities. But it doesn't take long before as you can see, we've got a high percentage that are below that 60 range that start trending down towards the bottom. Ideally, I think you want a bell-shaped curve that goes somewhere up in here and then peaks off here, and we're a little bit below that. Again, this is just a concrete and asphalt added in there, which is almost identical because that we've only got 1% of the streets in concrete. So, and again, what IMS, the company that did the scanning, said was this was something that they had seen in other communities, and it's not ideal, of course, but not unconventional either. So the next graph that we've got here is our pavement condition index on the bottom, percentage of the network, and it's more or less just putting the streets in terms of, if you were going to say excellent, very good, good, fair, marginal, poor, and very poor. Kind of breaks them up in groups according to the PCIs. What this also, kind of an offshoot of this, is that they found is we've got there are several streets that are down here in the poor to very poor range, where they're past the point of doing any of the simple resurfacing or crack sealing or microsurfacing or resurfacing. They're what's known as a reconstruction backlog. So the streets that are too far gone to actually just put an asphalt patch on and think it's going to hold. So we are at about 14% of our streets are at this reconstruction level, and what they've seen in other communities, basically 10 to 12% is generally ideal. 20%, when you hit that 20% number, it's really unmanageable without some annual high-level investment into the system, which are probably some sort of grants or really high dollar amounts to reconstruct large numbers of streets. So this also is a chart developed specifically for us. The red line in the middle is based on the ratings and everything that they've seen for us. The green line here is kind of hard to tell, but basically, if we want to keep, we're at 59.5 right now as our PCI index system-wide. If you total in all the goods, the bads, the average is 59.5. If we want to keep that level at 59.5, it comes down here and tells us that we should be budgeting between $2 and $2.2 million a year to keep that level. And that's just for asphalt paving. That's what they call the steady state level, basically keeping it as it is today, the overall system. If you wanted to increase the PCI, the overall system, up to 65, get a little higher quality, we'd be looking at about $3 million a year to be able to do that, based on the conditions that they see out there. This is a chart that I think is pretty good. They ran several what-if scenarios with different funding levels. And here, at about the $1 million range, the 1.5, to do nothing. If we did nothing at all, if we just wait 5 years, of course this was starting in 2012, and we're right here. And we haven't done anything. We have done significant projects the last couple of years. But basically, if you do nothing over the course of 5 years, we're going to drop 10 points, 11 points in our PCI index, and it'll take a very long time to bring that back up. Right now, over the last couple of years, and I'll show you some charts here, but we would have to spend, as I say, about 2.25 to maintain that 60 PCI index. If we wanted to fix everything, $39 million is what they estimated it would take to be able to do that, to bring our PCI index up to 95 system-wide, though. The one thing to be said about some of these numbers is basically this is just for paving. This does not include inflation over time. Doesn't include ADA compliance with installing curb ramps or replacing curb ramps at all those intersections. And it doesn't include any concrete curb repairs or any other miscellaneous repairs that go along with that. It also does not take into account any growth that we may have in the system. In the 90s and 80s, we had significant growth in the system with subdivisions coming online and a lot of development happening. Right now, we don't have that. It's hard to tell if we'd have a boom like that again, but there were several years where we had a lot of mileage every year, and these projections don't take into account any of that growth. So going back and pulling out a lot of files, I went back 20 years, back to 1994, and just wanted to show you what happened with the price per ton of asphalt. Basically, in 1994, we were at about $22 a ton, and that continued along pretty well up into the 2000s. We hit $34 a ton up here in 2001, and went back down again a little bit. So we were traveling along pretty good until we hit 2006, 2007. We jumped up into the $48 a ton range. We had a slight little drop there, and then in 2007, 2008, 2009, we're up here to close to $70 a ton. Actually, it was $70 a ton. We had a one-year spike where it dropped down a little bit, and then the last few years has been right back up there consistently. Coincidentally, people often ask about, what good did our license plate tax increase do? In 2008, we began collecting $5 extra. So right there is where that spike is. 2009, we began collecting the other $10 extra. Right there is where that spike is. So generally, our increases in license plate tax basically paid the increases in those costs per ton of asphalt. We haven't really been able to buy a whole lot more asphalt. We've been able to pay twice the cost for the tonnage of asphalt. And as Joe pointed out, it's 3 times as much if you go all the way back to 1994. This chart is not specific to Newark, but I found it, and it's relative to Newark. The numbers are not current right now, but it does. If you look at the blocks, I think that's what is more telling. When people ask, how much does it cost to pave a mile of road? Well, it all depends on the type of road. It depends if it's an arterial, depends if it's a collector, or it depends if it's a residential. And that all goes to the street widths and if there's turn lanes, how much striping it has, all that sort of thing. But generally, it costs about 6 times as much to do an arterial road as it does to do a residential street. Again, these numbers are probably about 10 or 20% low right now compared to when this chart was actually developed. So then I also went back and pulled out the mileage that we've done over the years. And the dark gray, as you can see, are non-ODOT funded projects. Basically, projects funded through the city's capital improvement program, our license plate tax, some cases our state gas tax. And actually back in the 90s and up until about 2002, we used some CDBG funds along with our paving projects to do actual paving. In the more recent years, we used some of the CDBG funds to do the curb ramps that are mandated by the paving. So if you just kind of look at what the mileage is, it seems like we're in sort of a declining scale here. This next chart is kind of hard to read, but it basically talks about our funding sources again. CI, SGT, LTPT are our capital improvements, state gas tax, license plate permissive tax, CDBG funds, as we said, In these early years in the 90s, those went specifically to paving projects. These later years, in the more current years, those funds go directly towards curb ramp replacements. These numbers here, Ohio Public Works, we've been lucky in 2008, 9, 10, 11 to get grant funding to help fund some of our local paving. And we can't always depend on that, unfortunately. This year we applied for $650,000 of grant funding. We were asked to reduce our request down to $450,000. So as time goes on, I expect more and more requests to be made through Ohio Public Works for other communities. And my fear is that our share is going to dwindle a little bit. Putting this in a chart kind of makes it a little bit easier to understand, but basically the colors you're looking at here, those colors don't show up quite the same. There's a real dark gray here. Those are the Ohio Public Works grants that we got. The more bluish gray, I guess, are our local funds. The green colors, as you see here, are actually the CDBG funds we've used over the years. And then the tan funds here are federal funding that comes through LCATS. And basically, those are the years where we've had a major ODOT resurfacing project in the city. 98, I believe, that might have been a West Main Street one. This one, 2002, North 21st Street. No, sorry, that's 612 North 21st Street. This one over here, $850,000 was Mount Vernon Road. 2011, geez, I should remember that one. That's not that far ago.
Second Street up
Let me think about that. 30th? Now 30th Street's over, and then this one over here. Last year we did 30th and West Main Street. Before this, we did West Main and Granville Street. This one here is actually in 2011 was Mount Vernon Road from DO Drive Newark. It was an ODOT project. So when you boil everything down, going back to the pavement management study, saying that we should be spending between $2 and $2.2 million a year to keep up with our system. You can see 2012 we were close to meeting that. 2007 we were also close. Really, any of these other years in here, we're not there. And again, when you take into account these ODOT projects don't happen every year, the OPWC grant funding doesn't happen every year, so we're really relying on the OPWC and the LCATS, the federal money, to supplement our local share. And this year we have no ODOT projects in the mill, and we have $450,000 in OPWC grant. We'll be matching that with another about $400,000 to $450,000 out of our license plate tax funds. So that's a picture of where we are and how much we've spent, how much we should be spending, and really that's about it. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them for anybody at this point.
Thank you, Brian. Does anyone on the committee have any questions or comments? Councilman Martin.
Yeah, Brian, I've noticed in the state of Ohio is really being proactive in their clearing trees and things to make sure that there's no shade on the roads because that deteriorates asphalt at a much more rapid pace. We currently have legislation on our books that says that no trees should be over our streets. Are we going to be any more proactive? I mean, it's costing us money. Are there any plans to be a little bit more proactive with that or working on that? And not only that, if it costs us less to do something like that, I'm assuming that's what the state of Ohio has figured out, is it's costing them less to chop all those trees, because they're chopping a lot of them.
Well, that's a one-time thing, and when they go along the right-of-way, like on Route 37 or 16,
Right.
you know, where they've cleared all those out, you know, they're good for probably 30 years or so, you know.
Right.
We don't have such a plan. Again, to institute something like that takes some money, and no, we don't. We leave that. We send out letters to the property owners asking them to trim the trees, but we don't have a plan like that. And again, to institute something like that would be quite expensive. The city does not have a arborist or tree cutting crew on staff. Our traffic control guys will go out and do that on an as-needed basis when stuff needs trimmed around a stop sign or a traffic sign or a traffic signal. But a widespread thing like you're talking about there would be, we would have to definitely contract that out.
Thank you.
Mr. Sheriff. Brian, just a clarification. On this chart here, on your local funds, I understand, okay, CI's cap improvements, SGT estate gas tax, and license plate permissive tax. What's TI? You see that there?
You know, I don't know what TI is. I think that got in there by mistake, so. I don't have a TI one. I'll take one. Yeah. No, I don't know what that is. And again, on one thing I didn't mention, that last word match there, on all these ODOT projects, we have a match. And sometimes that match is as little as 20%. Sometimes the match is up to 50%. It really depends on the amount of funding that we receive through LCATs. Again, there's more drains on the LCAT's budget. Back in the day, in the earlier days, it was pretty much always 80-20. We'd pay 20%. We could get federal funding on the 80% side. Now, with more communities asking for those funds, sometimes we're left with you know, like this one here, just last year, we're left with you know, here's what we've got in the budget. Can you take it and make something out of it? So, you know, I can't turn down $350,000. I got to make use of it somewhere. So we actually scaled back the project to make it fit, and that's where we are. We got to take advantage of the federal funding when we can, and to be able to have a match for that federal funding. Quite often I use our license plate permissive tax because that is deposited monthly, and I can project and I can manage how much the balance is in that account from a year-to-year basis. Right now, CDBG, I don't have that. You know, I don't have that luxury, of course. Capital improvements, I don't have that luxury. And our state gas tax funds, basically, those are all going now to the operation of the street and traffic control department. So that funding source has sort of dwindled away. So the license plate permissive tax is really the only tax that I can, if I need to plan an ODOT, and of course these ODOT projects are planned at least a year or so in advance. Those are the only sort of liquid funds that I can depend on year to year.
Thank you. Director Monner, do you have a question?
Yeah, Brian, I didn't see anything on your...
You have to go to the microphone.
Your mark, it's fine. Go ahead.
Okay.
We got you.
I just didn't see anything under weight control, Brian. Is there anything that we can do, you know, limiting the amount of weight that goes down some of these collector arterial streets to maybe reduce the load upon those streets?
You know, they didn't. They evaluated the structural capacity of those streets. Most of the arterials are built fine. The collectors have some issues in places that need to be repaired. The residential streets, typically, there's a lot of those that don't meet the structural capacity. So when you put a lot of heavy traffic on the residential streets, on some of the older residential streets, they're not built for that. Really didn't address any weight restrictions on streets. I think more of our problem over the years has probably been more the traffic volumes as opposed to the loads that are on the streets. Newark's grown quite a bit, and so we've got a lot higher volumes. I think I can remember back taking traffic counts on North 21st Street up around south of DO Drive when I first came to the city almost 25 years ago, and going out there and putting tube counters out on 21st Street, and I don't know, I'm thinking we were in the 15,000 car a day range up there at that point, and today we're at 35 to 40,000 cars a day through that section. So that's 25 years. That's not just a small snapshot in time anyway. So.
Thank you.
I wouldn't put the traffic counters out there now.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? If not, I appreciate.
Thank you. Just wanted to bring you up to speed on where our condition was, what our funding levels are, and hopefully we'll have more discussion about this in the coming weeks.
With that, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.